You're listening to LVB Podcast Show with your friend, advocate, and host, Alvaro.
Hello and welcome to LVB Show. My name is Alvaro and I'm very happy to be with you tonight. Before I introduce our guest, I want to say thank you so much to everyone listening from the United States, from Canada, from Australia, from Europe, from Africa, from Asia, from Latin America, and everywhere else where they are listening to the show. Tonight we have Kristy and we have Shawn Kirkpatrick. He is the founder of LoadStone GPS, and Kristy is a great helper there for this wonderful, affordable GPS application for iPhone, and if I'm not mistaken, for Android, but they will correct me if I'm mistaken. Thank you, Shawn and Kristy, for being with us tonight.
Oh, you're welcome.
So, Shawn and Kristy, this app is available also for Android?
No, not at the moment. I want to write an Android version, but first I have to learn Android, and I haven't really had the time to get around to that one yet. So it's only on iOS at the moment.
Okay.
People keep asking for an Android version, so I really do hope to produce one at some point, but not yet.
Okay, it's coming, my friends, in due time, like everything in life.
Yeah.
So, Shawn, can you tell us, before we go into this affordable GPS application for people who are blind and visually impaired, can you tell us about you and Kristy a little bit?
Okay. There, the open-ended question. I'm a software developer. I've been into programming for, well, many years. I would say like 30 years or so, which makes me sound a little old. And it's always been a big thing for me. I always write my own programming and stuff. And the Lodestone GPS is actually older than we think, because it was started in 2004 on the Nokia phones, the old Series 60 phones. And at that point, it was a freeware app that was, you could freely download it, and it was open source, so you could download the source code if you wanted to. And we had, I think at its peak, somewhere around 7,000 downloads. So, of course, when anything is free, it's always more, you get a lot more users. And then in about 2015, I started the iOS version, because Nokia had pretty much folded up a few years before then. And the iPhone was kind of where things were going. And that one required a complete rewrite of the program, and it also required me to make it a pay application, unfortunately, because in the Apple world, as we all know, you kind of have to pay for everything to keep things running. So, so that's a bit about me. And Kristy is, well, she's a bit of everything.
I'm the as we say in Canada, the person who kicks him in the butt. He kept saying, I should do an iOS app. I should do an iOS app. And I said, what is keeping you back? And he said, well, I can't afford an iPhone, right? Because as we know, Apple things are expensive. So we launched a GoFundMe campaign, which is something Shawn didn't know a lot about. He's a coder. He likes to be behind the scenes. Social media is not his thing. No. But in this day and age, we need to be on social media if we want to get known and we want to succeed. So right. I set up the social media, the GoFundMe through my Facebook account, and we started doing promotional videos, and that's how we got some hardware to work with. And it
didn't help. We also convinced my parents with a bottle of wine one night that they should like to fund me.
Yeah, which is great. So thank you to family.
Yeah, they were very useful in this particular project.
Yeah, and I think once people started learning about what we were doing, we realized there was so much interest, because people were missing the Nokia version and they really wanted it for iOS. So it kind of gave Shawn some prodding in that direction. And it was a good hard 2 years, I guess.
Yeah, it was 2 years or so.
2 years of work before we launched
in 2017.
July 22nd, 2017. And of course, me being the social person, I had to have a big party for it. He just wanted to launch it, you know.
Yeah.
He just wanted to say, it's here, come buy it. And I said, oh, let's have a party.
Yeah. So Kristy also does the website and the user. She writes the user documentation. Because if I wrote it, well, the spelling would probably be awful and the writing wouldn't be very good.
It helps that I'm not a technical person. And I'm a English as a second language teacher. So I tend to think of other users who may not have the tech speak, right? So it's good because in Lodestone, I think we have more second language users than English users. Is that right, Shawn?
Yeah, we have there's a lot of interest over in Europe and other countries like that. There's surprisingly in Canada and the US, it's actually at the moment the minority of the sales.
Very interesting. Now,
Yeah.
Tell us, I know it's a very affordable app, but tell us how much is it?
It's 10 Canadian dollars, so whatever that translates to in the various currencies of the world, but that's what it is. Or was it 10.99?
10.99.
Yeah, 10.99 Canadian.
Yeah.
So whatever
Okay.
the conversion rate is that day, going up and down as it does, but it is. I wanted to keep the price reasonable, but but not free, because there's a lot of operating costs to pay for Lodestone, so something had to cover it.
Now, let's go into the app. How
Sure.
does it work, Shawn? What is the goal of this application?
Well, the goal is that the app is completely text-based, so there's no graphic maps or anything like that, and it's written it's as we like to say, it's written for the blind by the blind, because I'm totally blind, and Kristy is partially sighted, and even when the original version for the Nokia was developed, all the developers on that team were also blind. So, whatever gets released, we know at least works with voiceover, which can be a problem because sometimes there's visual trouble on the screen that we might not necessarily catch until it goes into the world and someone says, hey, that doesn't work. So it's a text-based application, so you get text directions and text point descriptions and that kind of thing.
And I would like if you can give me an example. So you open the application. What are we going to find?
Okay, so you open up the app, and the first screen you come to is called the navigation screen, and on there are various controls, like you can show your current GPS position, and there's information about your current accuracy levels and things, and then you can do things like show your closest point, which will basically show you the closest point of interest around you, and then you have show neighborhood, which will give you all the points around you basically in a circle.
So it's like a sighted person who can just look around and go, ooh, what's around me?
Right.
So show neighborhood gives you
That capability. And then you can also do point searches, and the latest feature in a couple of versions back, like a few months ago, 1.5, thank you. You can keep track of that, is the turn-by-turn navigation feature. So you can put in a starting point and a destination, and it'll give you a route plan and a text-based route plan. So it'll tell you which streets to cross and where to go.
And people really, really wanted that.
Yeah, that was a really big feature request.
Yeah.
It's very important for us.
Yeah, and another feature, like a key point about Lodestone, is that once you have your data downloaded, it doesn't require you to have a continuous connection anymore. Like since I don't actually have a data plan on my cell phone because they're so expensive over here.
Yeah, Canada has horrible data rates.
Yeah, so I didn't want a GPS that would quit on me if I had no data. So Lodestone, once you have your mapping data downloaded into it, it doesn't require you to be connected anymore, unless you want to do something like, let's say, plan a route, because that still requires an online function. But then once you have that route plan, you don't need the data anymore again. So you can just plan the route at home, let's say, and then go out and use it.
That's very important for our listeners. The internet connection is very important if you can avoid that in many situations. And Shawn, something comes to mind. This application works with the screen lock?
Yes, it does. If you can, because that's pretty much a really common method that I use it in. Basically, I turn it on and then I put my screen to sleep, and then it just sits in my pocket and tells me what I need to know. It's not I've had requests for like a lot of the other GPS apps out there will tell you everything around you. Let's say as you pass, as you do all that kind of things. It's almost as if it's a
Yeah.
replacement for somebody looking around.
Yeah.
But Lodestone at the moment, anyways, is a bit minimalist in that respect, as in you plan where you want to go, you can check off the points you're interested in, and then it tells you about those only as you're moving around. So it tells you as you're approaching your points along your route, let's say, but it's not giving you all sorts of other output. So yeah, a really common method is to just put it in the pocket and listen for what you're actually listening for, and the screen stays asleep most of the time.
Now, Shawn, something else comes to mind, and it's about the points of interest. You were saying that you had like two modes. One mode was the neighborhood view, and the other one was the closest point of interest. Can you give us an example of those two modes?
Yes, I can. I can either, if we want, I can either tell you about it, or I can power up my phone and we can do a small demonstration on the actual app if you'd prefer.
That would be, yes, that would be even better, of course.
I probably should have thought of that at first.
Yes, you can.
It's okay. It's okay.
Just saying.
While Shawn is doing that, I just want to say for our listeners, we had
There
some
we go.
technical issues with Skype at the beginning because Skype had some issues with us. So, I mean, the technical things of Skype is a huge company, as we know from Microsoft. So, but now they are back on track, thankfully.
Yes.
So
I don't know how
now,
this is going to sound. I have the phone up and running. So I'm on my navigation screen.
Weak signal. Accuracy, 50 meters.
Okay, so we have a weak signal because we're indoors, obviously. So GPS
no
signals
problem.
don't tend to work all that well, but it'll be good enough for what we want.
Yes, and the sound is powerful. I can hear it.
Right. Okay.
Actions. Button.
Here, I'll give it a
Navigation.
volume.
Navigation. Heading.
Okay, so I'm at the top of my navigation screen.
Good signal. Accuracy, 10 meters.
Are we coming through there?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So
Actions. Button.
So we have the Actions button, which brings up a submenu of various things that aren't necessarily commonly used actions, but are necessary to have. And then we have
Repeat announcement. Button.
So you can repeat the last thing the program said.
GPS info. Button.
And GPS info.
Accuracy, 10 meters. Vertical accuracy, 13.1 feet. Heading accuracy, 62 degrees.
So it tells you your various accuracies of the GPS
Okay,
system.
I want to stop you there to analyze something that it said, okay?
Okay, yeah.
So it talked about degrees. Can you tell us what that means?
Yeah, the degrees, when you mean in the heading accuracy. It says
Yes.
degrees. Yeah, that is for the phone's magnetic compass, because as we know, the iPhone has a magnetic compass. So when you turn the phone, so when the top of the phone is facing away from you, you're pointing like that's its top. So it'll tell you which compass direction you're going, if that made sense. Yeah, so and that's in degrees. So that's what the accuracy, it's like right now it's at 62 degrees, so it's not very accurate, but if it were, once it gets a better signal lock, it would actually do quite a bit better.
Okay, so I want to continue in that subject, if I may, because I was talking yesterday to people in a WhatsApp group about the compass of the iPhone.
Right.
And I asked them, is this important for navigating from point A to point B? And they told me not so much. But I want your opinion, Shawn, because I have no idea how the compass works. And I do understand that many blind people don't know either.
Right. Okay.
And so my point is this.
Repeat announcement. Button.
Oops, I was just keeping the phone up.
You were saying that the degrees is key for accuracy, right?
Yes. The if that had said usually the degrees for the heading are about 15 degrees, because you have a 360-degree circle, right? So the more accuracy, the better off you are.
So the most accurate would be 0?
If you could, probably 1 degree, but in reality, I've never seen the phone get anywhere below 10, and that's pretty good, I think. Yeah, there's always going to be some slip with these things. But where the magnetic compass comes in useful is in GPS, unfortunately, because the signals aren't 100% accuracy. So when you're standing still, or what you perceive as standing still, the GPS might perceive as, especially if the signal isn't very accurate, it might think that you're moving, so your heading will start drifting all over the place. So it thinks you're pointing one way, then it thinks you're pointing another way.
Okay.
Whereas the magnetic compass will keep that very steady.
Mm-hmm.
It's like having a physical magnetic compass of old in your pocket with the needle, except this is an electronic version. So if you keep the phone pointed steadily, your heading will remain steady, and you can get points based on that, and it'll get a much better accurate reading of where you actually are and where you're facing.
So it's more reliable for orientation.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. You summarized that better than I did.
That's what I thought. I'm gonna give you an example of what I did yesterday in my house.
Okay.
Screen dimmed.
So I took the compass application, native application of the iPhone.
Right.
And I heard the information that told me that there's a lot of numbers there, north, blah, blah, blah. It's a lot of numbers. But
yeah,
anyways,
it is. Yeah, north, east, or north, west. There's a lot of things in there.
I focused on what could work for me. So what I did was I walked from my room to the bathroom, okay? Yeah. Now, the bathroom is located, I'm not very good with distances.
Right.
But to measure distances, but I'm going to say probably, I always measure things in meters, not in feet.
Yeah.
That's my only thing. And I wanted to ask you if that is a possible suggestion for the app, or do you have it in meters also as a possibility?
There is a settings with, actually, that's the other thing about Lodestone. Everything is configurable. The settings panel of the application has all sorts of things in it. So one of them is displays. So you can set you can measure things in feet, or you can measure things in meters. That's everything like that is configurable. So you can totally customize it to how you use it.
Okay.
Because I personally measure distances in meters, but altitudes, for example, I can only think of in feet. So the app, I can configure it to do that.
That's very smart. Okay. This is a powerful interview because it's not such an easy subject for our listeners, to be honest with you, because I want to go deep into this.
Yeah, navigation is a bit tricky, and I can see why listeners might, if you just had, let's say, the compass application on the iPhone, unless you have any idea what your directions mean, it's not really meant for that. It's just meant to tell you which way you're facing. So it's not a navigation app.
Right.
The one thing that application does have in it, though, is that you can use the phone as a level, which can be useful if you're trying to level something out in life.
Right.
Yeah.
So let me try to explain what I did. So
sure.
I walked from my room to the bathroom. It was probably about 3 meters.
Okay.
When I arrived at the bathroom door, I hold it on my hand, the iPhone, very steadily, so it would not move and it would recognize better the position.
Yeah, you can.
And it said something like 22, something like that.
Right. Okay.
Now, I went back to my room and I did the same route.
Yeah.
And when I went into the bathroom door, it said 22 again.
Right.
So what I tried to say, and I want your opinion, Shawn and Kristy, about it, is if we are able to combine, for instance, your application with the power of the compass accuracy, maybe we would be able to get closer to a restaurant door than ever before, or am I mistaken about that?
Well, what I think there's a few things that the iPhone can do, and it sounds like it might be mistaking the compass for the step counter, which is another piece that the iPhone can do, whereas it can sort of measure the number of steps you're taking and get a rough distance calculation from that.
Mm-hmm.
If it knows how far you're going per step, let's say, it can try to figure out how far you've actually traveled, not based on the GPS, but based on the movement of the phone. So that's kind of another piece that Lodestone doesn't use at the moment, because it's actually very hard to get it calibrated correctly. But whereas the compass accuracy is actually used, like, as I said, when you're standing still, because when you're moving, the GPS heading is actually quite accurate. But when you're standing still, it might start to rotate. So the compass kicks in and keeps it steady. So you know which way you're facing and which way the point of interest you're interested in may be. So that's where it's used there.
Okay, there's a lot to study about these technologies, but but I think it's important for our listeners to have a little bit of an idea how the compass works, because if not, sometimes when it says some degrees, you will not understand anything and you're going to mess up with that and you're going to lose on a technology that works for us.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if you're only working in degrees, it might not mean much. Now, if it's telling you like north or south or whatever, that might be more of a human direction. And Lodestone can do that too. It can actually be set, like its headings can be, you can actually tell it to give it in degrees or in cardinal directions or clock face.
See, I prefer clock face. I understand clock face better than north, south, east.
Yeah.
West. I know if I'm heading 12 o'clock, that's straight ahead. Don't tell me
you're right.
North or south.
You're right. I'm with you. I get a little bit confused with north, east, and blah blah blah. So
yeah, me too, actually.
I'm with you. But I think this interview is not only about your GPS application, but so people understand how GPS systems work and why the compass was installed on the iPhone in the first place.
I think what people have to understand about GPS, it's not like Star Trek. It won't just beam you exactly where you need to be.
Yeah.
You actually have to use the tools in the GPS application and some of your common sense.
Yeah. It might get you to let's say a GPS will get you to a building, but you might have to use your orientation and mobility skills to find the door, because it might not be quite accurate enough to get you on like spot on accuracy.
Shawn, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
It's unbelievable. I'm thinking about all these questions that I don't have written down, but anyhow.
Well, that's okay.
So, when it comes to the accuracy of GPS, would you say that every single GPS app have the same accuracy?
If it's on an iPhone, they should, if they've programmed correctly. There's like with anything, you can actually tell the app how much accuracy you want. And I think most of them would be probably using the best accuracy it can. So on an iPhone, they should have roughly the same accuracy. And for a portable device like an iPhone, it's actually pretty good these days. Like I've seen accuracies as good as 5 meters come out of this.
Oh, wow. That's wonderful.
And on some days, the other day, I was actually at a bus loop and I was at a bus stop pole, and it said, the pole was 1 meter away and my cane had touched it. So that's how accurate I've been able to get this thing sometimes.
Wow.
And then other times you're right on top of something and it's like, it says it's 50 meters away and you're like, no, it's not. It's right here. Like, yeah. So it really depends a lot on the conditions, especially if you're like in, let's say, a downtown area where there's a lot of skyscrapers and towers and things. Your GPS signals can suddenly start going crazy on you. And you have to know, like as a user, when your equipment is misbehaving and giving you bad information, and you just have to put it away and use your own orientation and mobility skills.
That's when I'm very happy that I have some usable sight and I can look for a street sign or a landmark.
Yeah,
because I get very irritated when the heading is spinning and I just shut the app off and say, okay, I'm good.
Yeah, no, she doesn't like it when the technology doesn't work. When it works, it's great, but when it doesn't work, I get yelled at.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I have to agree with Kristy right there.
See?
Now, talking about that option of the closest point of interest.
Okay, yeah, I can show you how this works. Here, let me bring that back on the screen.
Navigation.
Okay, so
show lock point.
So, wait.
Show name. Show closest position.
Okay,
button.
So there's the position
latitude
button.
49.21052.
That shows us all our latitude,
longitude. -122.9212739. Altitude 301.7 feet.
So those are our current GPS coordinates, and that probably doesn't mean a lot to most people. So we'll show them.
Right.
Show closest point. Button. Ash Street and 5th Avenue. 20 meters at 8 o'clock.
So Ash Street and Fifth Avenue is our closest intersection, and it says that it's at 8 o'clock. And the way that the phone is currently oriented on the desk, that would be pretty much accurate. We're actually getting accurate.
Don't come visit me unless you call first.
Yeah, it's actually, it's thankfully during a demo, it's cooperating, and it actually is correct. If I think about where that intersection is from here, it would be at 8 o'clock. And maybe 20 meters. That's about 60 feet, give or take. And that'd be about right.
Shawn, I have a question.
Yeah?
I have tried many GPS applications.
Yeah.
And sometimes they say your destination is on your right.
Yeah, that's usually in like the route planning stage, like a turn-by-turn plan. It'll say that.
But actually is on the other side.
Yeah,
so
sometimes
it's actually to the left. Why is that?
That can be because sometimes if you're, let's say, walking to a destination, that's the GPS heading problem kicking in again. If you're coming up slow, then the GPS heading will start getting less accurate, so it might start to spin around the opposite direction. So you can get a misread. Again, where the compass comes in, I try to make Lodestone not do that when possible. It still might do it from time to time, but I've kind of gotten it down to being fairly accurate.
So, Shawn, what you're trying to say, if I understand correctly, I hope my brain is working well today, because this subject, again, is not as easy as people may think.
No, people want to pick up the app and it takes them where they want to go without any intervention. But yeah, that doesn't really happen.
Yeah, we have to be focused on what we're doing. Absolutely. So what you're trying to say, if I'm not mistaken, is that with your application, maybe the mistake of figuring out if we are to the right is actually to the left, it doesn't happen as much?
I've tried to minimize it. I can't say for sure that it won't happen, because someone will say that it did, and then but it's a common thing with most applications, and it can just be the GPS heading can sometimes drift a little bit. But yeah, with Lodestone, I try to use the magnetic compass. So if you have your phone pointed, let's say, upside down, you might get a reverse direction. The phone is sitting in your pocket kind of sideways or at a weird direction. The heading might not be exactly accurate then either. So again, you have to be aware of what your equipment is doing.
But I have a question.
Yeah.
If, let's say, you are walking and it says your destination is 20 feet to your right.
Yeah.
Now, my question is this.
Yeah.
What if you want to make sure that this is absolutely correct, at least in the right direction? So can you do something to calibrate again, or to make sure that you are doing well with your device?
Well, the easiest thing to do then is to stop and actually hold the device in your hand and point at the proper thing, and then check the direction again. If you point the device at the top, like if you use the top, if you have the phone basically holding it normally as if you're looking at it, so the top is facing away from as if you were looking at it, then you'll get the proper heading. So if you stay still for a second, let everything settle down a little bit, and then hold the device correctly, you'll get a much better heading. Whereas sometimes that's easier said than done, because if you're traveling, you're either moving, maybe you're being guided, maybe you're using your cane, and you can't really stop. You might be in the middle of a sidewalk or something and don't want to hold up the rest of the people behind you. So sometimes stopping and settling and checking is a little harder than that. But that's usually what will give you the best accuracy, if you take a couple of seconds and check it. Or you can just depend on the machine and use your O&M skills to get you to where you are, if it's telling you that you're at least in range.
Right. But it's a good tip for our listeners, because I have seen many demonstrations on the streets on YouTube.
Right.
And many blind users, they get lost because they say, oh my God, they are saying it's to the right, and to the right there's nothing. So it has to be to the left, but they didn't analyze that. So we have to be careful with that, because if not, we are misusing technology,
Right. And of course, the data can only be as good, let's say, as the route planning data. Let's say if the sources of information that it's used to plan your route are incorrect, or have some sort of a glitch, and we don't know because they come from elsewhere, you may end up with something like that happening.
Okay.
Fortunately, we haven't done any videos of Lodestone on the street because we haven't figured out how to exactly shoot one yet. So we don't have to worry about that right now.
Well, we want
Okay.
good sound quality. That's
Yeah. Yeah, the other thing I've noticed about a lot of the GPS demos is the sound quality is awful, and I don't like that. So if I do
Yeah.
one on the street, which I do want to do at some point, I want to actually have a really good sounding video and something that's accurate that we can demonstrate correctly.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Okay. So more questions. This is a lot to ask.
Oh yeah, there's a lot to. No, that's no problem. That's good that people like ask questions, because that way, and it's surprising people do ask a lot of questions. So that's normal.
So let's talk about the maps.
Okay.
Do you use Google Maps or Apple Maps?
What it's using to pull now is OpenStreetMap.
Oh, that's another one.
Yeah, that's the big one that a lot of the projects use now. Because the problem with Google Maps and Apple Maps is that you can't download the data in bulk. You usually have to have a connection to the internet in order to use like data within a few hundred meters of, let's say, your current location. They don't let you pull it in bulk.
Oh.
Whereas OpenStreetMap will let you pull in all the data for all the world if you want to, and I want to. So that's what we do for Lodestone, and the maps come from what we call Lodestone Point Share, which is a server that I have running, and it duplicates the OpenStreetMap information, all of it, all 3 or 4 terabytes of it, on one server, and then it also does some other things like calculate all the intersections in the world. So that's what when you download all of the OpenStreetMap data, you don't necessarily get intersections by default, and those are really useful.
Yeah.
So the point share server calculates all 29 million intersections in the world, and so you have those available as well. And I also merge in data from, at least locally, I merge in data from, let's say, public transit systems, so bus stop information, and other sources, so I can integrate city addresses and things. And also users of Lodestone can share their points with PointShare. So if your country, let's say, doesn't have much map data, or you want to put in something that isn't marked, a user can actually upload that to the system, and the next person that might need that point can use it.
That sounds interesting. Now, I wanna talk about. You just talk about bus stops. I have a question regarding that, because I have been analyzing buses and subway stations regarding GPS, regarding the blind.
Right.
And today, what I understand is a complicated matter as well, because because when we talk about the subway,
right,
someone was telling me, look, there are millions of companies trying to make this right.
Yeah.
Because they know not only blind and visually impaired people, but everybody could use a good system to get oriented into the subway system, let's say in New York City.
Right.
Nobody has been able to make it, but people are working hard to do something like this, Shawn. Be able to take for listeners who have you been in New York?
No, I haven't.
Okay, you have to go. Okay, so I have worked in New York, so for a listener, let's say you take the subway, the A subway.
Right.
Okay, so you take the A, but you would like to know what is the next stop.
Right.
You have no idea. So the problem with...
You can, yeah. Actually, that's not entirely true, because now what Google came out with in the last, I don't know, I'm thinking the last maybe 9 or 10 years, I think it might have started in 2010, was something that they called GTFS, and it was a Google Transit feed specification. So Transit could publish all the coordinates of, let's say, bus stops, train stations, and all of that stuff to Google, and they could plan out various routes with it. And this is now an open specification, so app developers like myself can actually download these the feeds from the various transit agencies and actually map out like where all these things are. So I think Lodestone may actually include. Does it include New York? I can't remember. I've got a bunch of them included.
So,
But, yeah,
so Shawn,
it can be
this
done.
sounds exciting, but can you explain a little bit more how would it work if let's say I'm in a restaurant, okay?
Okay, let's
And
say I'll use the Vancouver system because that's
sure,
the one I know, and I know that we actually have all the data for.
sure.
And here we have something similar. It's not a subway system, but it's a SkyTrain system.
It runs above ground.
It runs above ground, and sometimes it does go underground in various things. But it is basically a set of train lines. And with the transit feed specification, I have access to the coordinates for every station on that line. So it's like any other point of interest in the Lodestone. So if I want to go to, let's say, Granville SkyTrain Station, one of our main ones,
Yeah.
I can just enter that into the system, and if I have the coordinates to that station, then the Lodestone will tell me when I'm approaching that one. The same with all the other bus stops in the system. We have about almost 10,000 bus stops in the whole transit system, and Lodestone's mapping data contains the coordinates for each and every one of them.
Okay, Shawn, let me try to understand because I think this is useful for listeners. If I'm in the subway A,
Right.
yeah, and I'm inside the train, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Is there a way, you say, to find out what is the next stop and the next and the next and the next? Is that correct?
It right now you could actually I don't have Lodestone automatically tracking, let's say, the next bus stops, but you could actually, like this, if you end up at a stop, you could see which one you were at. That all, of course, means if you have a GPS signal. In the case of something like a subway in a place like New York, the signal may actually drop out if you're too far underground, and that's just a function of GPS. If you're underneath like a lot of concrete or just too far underground, you don't actually get a signal, and you really can lose track of where you are.
Okay,
that can happen here too. In Vancouver, we have a couple of SkyTrain stations where the signals do actually drop out on you, and it is hard to navigate at that point.
Right, but Shawn, I heard that a year ago, Wi-Fi was introduced in the subway system in the world, and
Right.
with Wi-Fi, they say you can actually, be positioned and find yourself anywhere in the subway. That's what I heard.
I have heard about a couple of projects to use Wi-Fi access points. That's not quite GPS anymore. That's a totally different thing. I have heard a couple of projects where people are trying to map out, let's say, where these Wi-Fi signals are coming from, where they are, and then so you can actually use a navigation app to triangulate your position that way.
Okay.
It's an interesting technology. I keep meaning to look into this, but yeah, I haven't actually seen it work reliably yet. But I think people are actually working on that. And the other option that might come up that'll probably help is if the Europeans ever get their Galileo GPS system fully operational. That's supposed to help with indoor navigation.
I hear that as well. You're right.
And I think that'll be really nice because apparently they're supposed to get down to 1 meter accuracy, and you're supposed to be able to do a lot better indoors than the current system. And, well, according to their schedule, they're supposed to be up by 2020, but who knows if that's happening or not.
That's a good point, and we have to follow Galileo. You're absolutely right about that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that if it comes online.
And Shawn, so to end this subject of the subway, I'm sorry if I'm too into that, but I think it helps a lot of people because many people I know, they just don't know how to do it. So what you're saying is it is possible. You are not saying it's happening. And what would be your advice if you are at the subway and you want to keep track on where you're going? Understand it may not be perfect, but may help.
Right. Oh, yeah, for sure. If the application you're using has access to that information, then yeah, of course, it may actually be quite useful to you, even if it's not necessarily perfect. Like I know here when I'm riding on the SkyTrain line, most of it is above ground, but there's a few stations that are in, like there's a couple of tunnels and then they go underground, and the signals will drop out. But it's better to know that you're at least within range of that. And even if the signal says like it only has an accuracy of like a few hundred meters, it's better than not having anything at all.
So with Lodestone would be able to do that. You said that you don't have turned on the option of tracking stops.
Yeah, right. It is a feature that has been requested. Basically, like some GPSs where you can tell it to monitor, it can basically tell you as you pass certain categories of points. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's a feature that it's on the to-do list, basically. I've had that request where people, let's say, if you wanted to know about every bus stop that you ever passed, for example, it might be able to do that. But at the moment, that doesn't happen. You actually have to either ask it where you are or have checked it off as something that you're interested in for it to tell you anything.
Now, another question comes to mind about subways, but I hope it's the last one.
Train of thought.
Is this? You were talking about Google,
Yeah.
but you're not recommending people to use Google Maps on the subway, are you?
Well, not unless, of course, they have. I don't know how well it works. I guess people can use whatever works for them. I just mentioned Google because they started the specification for the transit feeds, and a lot of transit companies have gotten on board now. So we have a lot more data out there than was available even a few years ago, because a lot more transit companies, well, even for their own fleets, of course, they map out where all their stuff is. So it just makes sense to make that data available online to users, and then they can write various applications that can take advantage of it.
So you can use Lodestone and it will take some information from Google.
No, it actually, Lodestone itself doesn't talk. It's a bit more complicated than Lodestone itself doesn't actually talk to other people. When it downloads its mapping data, it comes from PointShare. And what happens at my end for PointShare is I'll load the information in from the various transit agencies.
Okay.
So because you have to go all over the internet to find these feeds sometimes. So it handles all of that. Like the PointShare is handling all of that stuff. So the Lodestone user doesn't have to be concerned with that. They'll either have the data or they won't.
And if they want data, they can just ask Shawn.
Yeah, they can request, and if it's available, then maybe I can go hunt it. Because at the moment I'm not putting in everything because there's literally hundreds of these transit feeds that could go in at some point. When tracking them all is just it's a lot of work.
I understand. Now,
right. It's kind of the opposite problem. When Lodestone started out back in 2004 on the old Nokia phones, there was no public sources of mapping data. Everyone had to put in their own points. And now in 2019, we're drowning in data. We almost have too much because there's public mapping sources, there's transit agencies, cities are like here now we have what the cities are calling an open data project. So they're publishing the addresses or coordinates of everything. You can get maps of drinking fountains, maps of vehicle charging stations and parks and everything you can, and all the addresses in the city. And so we almost have the opposite problem now, is it's too much data sometimes.
Now, I was reading that there is a very big transit system technology from Microsoft, like a cloud system that many transit agencies are using. Is that correct?
There might very well be. I don't know a lot about how the transit agency systems work. That might be referring to what here we have all of our buses when they actually stop, they speak, or when they're coming up to a stop, they actually do speak where they're going. And I'm not sure about the exact technical back end of how all that's working. And we've had that for about 10 years now or so. And it's a very useful feature for us. So the buses know where they are, and the TransLink operators also know where the buses are and all of that. And that could be handled by someone like Microsoft or something. That's a lot of back end work.
Okay, now going back to the application, my friends.
Yeah. Sure.
I'm sorry, I'm a very curious person, and I do ask a lot of stuff. Anyhow.
Oh, that's good, because I'm sure people probably know, or they haven't thought of these things, and like, is this useful, or can it be done?
It's very exciting, I have to say, Shawn.
We're in a good time of technology where at least this stuff is now possible.
Oh yeah, I have to agree with you. And so you have another mode, and is this show neighborhood or something?
Here, I'll bring up the neighborhood in this.
Show closest point. Navigation.
Okay.
Heading.
So,
Show neighborhood. Button.
so here's our show neighborhood feature. So if
Ash
I
Street
tap
and Fifth
this,
Ave. 20 meters at 8 o'clock.
so it came up in
Swipe up or down to select a custom action. Then double tap to activate.
So Ash Street and Fifth Ave is again our closest point. So what the neighborhood will do is it's giving the points in roughly a circle around the current location.
Okay.
So it's basically that one that we got there is the closest point to our current location. And then if I move down,
NB 8th Street FS 5 Avenue. 99 meters at 11 o'clock.
see NB 8th Street 5 Avenue. That's actually a bus stop. That means it's a northbound bus stop.
Okay.
And that would be our closest point. In this neighborhood, for some reason, there isn't a lot of mapping data because, like, the apartment building that we're currently in, for example, isn't on the system for some reason.
Which is a
Oh,
good
wow.
thing.
Which I guess that's OpenStreetMap. Maybe I don't know how they source their data exactly, but maybe nobody sourced this city or this particular portion of it. So sometimes you get, like, little amounts and sometimes you don't. And then
5th Ave and 7th Street. 101 meters at 5 o'clock.
So another right now we're in a residential area.
Mm-hmm.
And coming up, there'll be a few, then we're on the border of a business area as well.
8th Street and 5th Ave. 109 meters at 10 o'clock.
And Fifth Ave, so more intersections.
Pharmacy. Pharmacy. 118 meters at 5 o'clock.
So there's a pharmacy store.
Now, Shawn.
Yeah?
No, tell me.
Okay, so when you have a point on screen, let's say, like we have right now,
Yeah.
a pharmacy, there's various actions that you can do with the point.
Oh,
So
tell me
if you're
about
interested, let's say you wanted to get to that pharmacy, you have
Yeah.
the following actions here. If I double tapped it, it would act as a checkpoint, where basically that means if I checked it, then Lodestone would tell me if I approached it, if I was moving toward it. But there are other things I can do.
Lock.
I can lock it. So the lock point means that you can keep monitoring that point. If you tap the show lock point button on the navigation screen, you can keep track of where that point is, no matter in relation to where you currently are. And then
Add to route.
there's add to route. So Lodestone can do routes. Checkpoints and routes are similar things in Lodestone, but routes have a defined order. So if you have a specific order that you want to know about points in, then you can set up a route. And they also have a forward and reverse direction.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then there's also
Show neighborhood.
so you can show the neighborhood around that particular point if you want to zero in and see what's around that, not just the current neighborhood you're in, but around a specific point, which can be useful if you see something that's close to what you're looking for, but you don't see it exactly.
Yeah.
And then explore, which is another mode that Lodestone can do where you can explore by compass directions. So
everything north pharmacy.
Yeah, so you could look at in the north direction, or you have the various cardinal directions around it.
Get directions.
Get directions, that's the route planning point. So if I wanted to do a turn-by-turn navigation route to that particular pharmacy, I could hit this option and it'll bring that up for me.
Oh, wow.
And then there's
share.
There's a share, so if I wanted to send that point to point share, it already has it, so that wouldn't be necessary. But if it was a custom point, then you could send it up.
Delete,
if I wanted to take that point out of my database for some reason.
But not out of point share.
But not out of point share. It just takes
it
out of your personal copy.
Show details.
And show details, which will give me a lot more information about the point. So let's demonstrate that screen for a second.
Neighborhood. Back button. Point details.
Point
Heading.
details. So
primary information.
Heading.
Display name. Pharmacy. Pharmacy.
Okay, so that's what it is. It's a pharmacy and it's called Pharmacy.
Address.
So address, I guess there isn't one listed for that particular point.
Type. Pharmacy.
So the type of point that it is, and that's a pharmacy.
Category. Healthcare.
Okay, and that's the category of the point is in healthcare.
Name. Latitude. 49. 2111884.
So the GPS latitude.
49 degrees 12 minutes 40.28 seconds north. Longitude, minus 122. 122 degrees 55 minutes 12.05 seconds west. Grid square, CN89MF90.
Grid square, which seems to be used by a lot more people than I would think. I think it's used by, I don't know exactly where you use grid squares, but this has been a pretty popular request. So it's there if people need it.
Accuracy, 0 meters.
Okay, that's the meters of the accuracy that the point was
status,
at.
public.
And it's a public point.
ID, 9, 6, user ID, 54,000 tags, heading.
And then down here, there's tags, which is various. You can, with Lodestone, unlike a lot of other GPS apps, you can store almost anything you can possibly imagine about a point. So you can store various notes, you can store the address, you can store all kinds of characteristics. So let's see what this one has associated to it.
Amenity, pharmacy.
So the amenity category is set to pharmacy, and there's tons of things within there that it could be set to.
This is why you need a Spanish translator to translate all these tags.
Exactly. And so dispensing is set to yes, so I guess that means it will do a drug dispensing function.
Name, pharmacy.
And the name.
Selected. Navigation.
Okay, and that's all that
tab.
is. That's a pretty
4.
basic ones. Other points in here might include things like hours of operation or telephone numbers or websites. So yeah, you can have all kinds of things stored with a point, and it depends on the source of the point as to how much information is actually in there.
Shawn,
yeah,
you mentioned that there was a feature that people requested. I didn't hear what it was and how it works. Can you tell me again?
Oh, was that the grid squares?
Yeah. What do you mean? What does that do? How does that work?
It's a way of representing. Now let's see if I remember it, because since I don't use it really myself, I'll try to summarize it as I understood it. It's a way of representing a point's latitude and longitude coordinates in a series of letters and numbers. So it's about, I think it's 8 characters long. So it's a quick way to represent a point's coordinates. And it's used
Holy moly.
Okay. It's used a lot by ham radio operators, apparently. If they want to give out latitude and longitude coordinates of a location, they'll use the grid square because it's easily heard by radio signals.
So it's like a secret code for a document.
So Shawn.
Yeah?
That feature is incorporated?
Yeah, it is actually in here. I'll show you.
Name, pharmacy, dispensing, yes, amenity, tags, user ID, status, accuracy, grid square, grid square, CN89MF90.
So that's the current grid square of that particular point. It's CN89F90 or whatever it said there.
Oh, that is really Chinese for me. That's for sure.
Yeah. I don't quite know. As I said, I don't use these myself, but I got a lot more requests than I would have thought for that particular feature. People did want to have the ability to see a point's grid square.
And I will say that this is one of the advantages of Lodestone. If there's enough request for a feature, it's not like Apple where it'll say, well, I don't know.
Yeah, it never gets implemented, at least. If
Shawn will try his best. If it's very popular, he'll implement it, even if he doesn't use it.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of other features in Lodestone that do that, too.
Shawn, I have a question.
Sure.
I have many questions.
Sure. We have time.
Still, I have many questions because this show has been more powerful than I ever thought. There's so much to it. My question is this: what did you study?
Okay, I guess I should in the about myself. I'm not very good at saying about myself, I guess. I went to British Columbia Institute of Technology to study computer programming. It's one of our more recognized technical institutions here. I'm sure it is. At least it was back in the day. I don't know where it's gotten into now, but at the time it was, and that was in about 1990. I took I was actually taking a certificate in programming. But since then, I pretty much have taught myself. So all of this iOS programming, I basically had to learn on my own. I have to say, Shawn, for our listeners, I have used many GPS applications during the years, but this application seems like a Swiss knife. It has so many things to it. I think that was...
You should tweet that to our account. I like that. That's a really good testimonial. Thank you.
Yeah, that's kind of what I've always been thinking. Like, I want Lodestone to have enough tools inside it, not that get in the way, but should you need something, it's there. That's what I like. I like a tool that's simple. It looks easy, but it actually has a lot of power under the hood that you can use when you need to. Because Lodestone, there's a lot of other little features that are in Lodestone as well that users can use for various things that might not be used every day, but when you want them, they're there. Shawn, I really would like you to tell me a lot about some of the other features that it has, but before that, I have two questions. Okay.
So one is, I heard the other day that open source map system is more accurate than other systems. Do you agree, or do you think it's the same?
I've heard, unfortunately, see, maybe I'm bad for this, but usually when I write, like, let's say I write Lodestone, that's what I use. I don't actually use a lot of the other systems because I don't want to get biased, for one thing, or start accidentally copying them if I can help it. So I use like Lodestone and the OpenStreetMap data, and so far I think it's been pretty accurate. Now I assume that Google and Apple, they're probably pretty close. I guess they kind of have to be competitive these days, and each system is going to have its down points, and, like, some stuff won't have points and other stuff will. But I think they're kind of sharing amongst each other, and yeah, I think they would be quite accurate. But I think OpenStreetMap is more likely to be accurate because it's crowdsourced. There's the talking thermometer again.
We must have been talking for an hour.
Yeah, they have talking thermometer, which is great. Technology is wonderful.
Everything in this place.
This one's temperamental, though. Sometimes it'll tell me it's 100 degrees Celsius in my bedroom, and it's just not. Because I wouldn't be alive.
Yeah, it gets a little...
No, if it is Celsius, you wouldn't be alive. You're absolutely right. Oh, boy. But for our listeners, something that I say, and it seems like Kristy has copied what I think, and I always say technology is wonderful when it works, and it's not so great when it doesn't. And Kristy thinks the same. So, and I'm sure Shawn does, and everybody does think the same. But anyhow, I have a powerful question for Shawn.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
This is a complicated question. We'll see if I'm able to phrase it well, and you're able to answer okay, because it's not easy.
Sure.
Okay, so for years I have heard about creating your own points of interest.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to give you an example and see where I'm wrong or where I'm right, okay?
Okay.
So if I'm trying, the first time, let's say I am able to make it to, I was going to say a subway station, but I'm going to put another example so listeners don't think I'm obsessed with subways.
Okay.
Let's say I'm trying to get to Domino's Pizza, okay?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so I go with a friend to Domino's Pizza. I arrive at Domino's Pizza.
Right.
Okay, now I go inside Domino's Pizza restaurant and I sit down, okay?
Right, yeah.
Then I open Lodestone, for an example, and I create a point of interest, Domino's Pizza, okay?
Right, yeah.
Okay, now, next day, I want to go to Domino's Pizza. I am 200 feet away from Domino's Pizza.
Right.
This is my question.
Yeah.
How accurate is going to be the point of interest when I'm walking towards that place, and it's going to beep, it's going to say, you arrive, and how accurate is going to be if you actually put a point of interest inside Domino's Pizza? And before you answer, I want to go further than that.
Yeah.
If you have an application as complete and as powerful as yours,
that
you use this grid blah 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 thing, and you use the
squares,
the compass thing, and you have so many options.
Yeah.
I would think for our listeners, and you will correct me if I'm wrong, that you could be actually very accurate, because if you put it inside of a place, come on, it cannot be 100.
No. See, I can. I know exactly where you're going with this one, so I can answer that one. Yeah, Lodestone, you can create points of interest. It's fully capable, and you can save, as I said, as much detail about a point as you could ever want to save. And the accuracy all depends on where you are when you do it, when you do the save. So let's say if you save inside a building, your GPS accuracy might have dropped considerably because inside you don't get as accurate of a signal. So if I were to save a point of interest from inside where I am right now, the accuracy wouldn't be as good as if I were, let's say, standing outside the building's front door and outside, and then save the point. But I'll give you an example of a point of interest that we have in Lodestone, at least I have in Lodestone. Vancouver has this what's called Celebration of Light every year in the summer. And what it is, it's a series of fireworks shows that me and Kristy really like to go and see every year. And what we've done in Lodestone is we found the optimum perfect viewing point.
Wow.
It's down at the water. It's right like at the seafront.
It's a rock.
It's a rock, basically, that we
Oh,
found.
wow, it's a rock.
Yeah. We go down every year. We take our picnic dinner and we sit and we wait for the show. And we get to the same point every year because back in 2010 or something with Lodestone, I actually saved the coordinates of this thing. So we usually get within about, 10 to 15 feet of where we want to be every year. We're pretty much the same. Like Kristy takes lots of videos and pictures, and they're usually from nearly the same position. That is if there isn't like somebody sitting there already or something. So we usually land pretty much on it because the point was saved with really good accuracy outdoors on the water where you get a nice, an accuracy of about 5 meters, let's say.
Wow, that's very good.
We can land pretty much straight on it. And there's been some years, I think this year we pretty much got the same seat for all 3 shows. We landed pretty much right on it.
Wow.
So so you do have to think about what you're doing when you save the point. So if you went into, let's say, your example of a Domino's pizza, if you started saving the point within the restaurant, your accuracy might start drifting a bit. But what you could do is you could start entering the information into the app. Let's say and then when you come out of the restaurant, you can tell the system, there's a button when you're saving a point, there's a update coordinates. So when you get outside to a more accurate signal location, you can update the coordinates, then save the point, and you would have a far more accurate point of interest that way.
Aha.
And then if that point of interest isn't available to other, if it's not within point share already, then you can actually share that. So let's say the next person in your city or town or whatever that wants to see that point can have access to it.
Okay, that is an interesting thing. Let me try also to understand that one.
Sure.
So point share is like a database of places?
Yes, it's a database of a huge number of points. It's basically what this system does is it has downloaded all of the points available from OpenStreetMap. It's downloaded every single one into a huge database, and it keeps this system up to date pretty much daily. It's updating it. And
so think of the name, right? Point share.
Yeah.
So it's sharing points.
Yeah. And so it's a gigantic database. And then what you do as a Lodestone user is you select the region that you want to download points for, because obviously it would be far too big if you tried to download the entire world into your phone. It won't fit. Yeah. So, for my region, let's say I select Vancouver, I download all the points that are available for that particular region, because that's where I'll be using it the most. And yeah.
Okay, so my question would be, if I create the point of interest of Domino's Pizza,
right?
How do I know if it is available or not, and if I can add that to point share?
Well, you can, if you create it, you can add it to point share, whether it's in there or not. Like something else may have created it, but if it was already in there, you probably wouldn't need to create it. Like I find now, with all of the available public mapping data, that I'm not creating points of interest as much anymore. Back in the early days of Lodestone, Kristy could tell you, as we traveled, I would be stopping all the time and entering points because there was no data to be had. But now
I was the eyes. They would tell me, like Shawn would say, "What are we near to?" And then he'd enter it in, and it was painstaking.
Yes.
It was,
and of course that was on the Nokia days before there was no such thing as dictating information into the phone. You had to tap it all in via the keypad. But now with all the public available data, there's a lot less of entering in points of interest. So there's just, we might do it if there is something that isn't marked off, let's say, or a private point. Because like our fireworks viewing spot that I was telling you about, it's on point share, but it's marked as a private point. So only I can see it because, I don't want the rest of the public having it. So, like, for example, if you wanted to enter your house into there, you might not want the rest of the world seeing your residence. So you can mark it as a private point. And that way it won't transmit to everybody.
So I would say, before you mark a point of interest, you search for it.
Yeah, see if it's already in there, and then if it is, then hey, that's great. But if it's not, and it's possible, like for example, this apartment building isn't in the mapping data for some reason. So if I wanted to enter it, I could.
And so, Shawn, if it is already on
Yeah.
the database, when I try to save it, it's not gonna let me save it, right?
It will, because maybe like the point in the database will differ. Like they're all identified by a point ID and a user ID, so we know where they came from, and like so they're all different. So your point, for example, might end up being more accurate than the one we have in the data.
Okay.
Or it might be vice versa, or maybe you've entered more information about the point, let's say.
Okay.
So sometimes you can get 2 points in the database, and it all depends on which one might be more accurate.
Now,
A lot of overlap for, let's say, our local transit bus stops. Like OpenStreetMap might have a thing they call bus stop, and then the transit information has the exact name of the bus stop and more accurate coordinates. So you'll see a point that might duplicate a little bit in the database that way.
Okay. I'm sorry for our listeners that I'm talking so much today, but this is so exciting. And to be honest, Shawn
Hey,
and
it's
Kristy.
digital. That's why we can do that. We have all the time we need.
Yes, but sometimes a girl has a hair appointment to get to.
Oh, you're fine.
What I'm trying to say, Kristy and Shawn, for our listeners, is not so many people who does interviews about GPS go this further. That's what I'm trying to say.
No,
that is
quite true. Yeah.
But I want to go further because I want to help, and I want to understand. Because if not, all these years, Shawn and Kristy, I have been using GPS understanding a little bit. Now I'm understanding much more. And the other thing, Shawn and Kristy, is we are providing useful tips for people, and I think that is priceless in my view. Now, more questions.
Okay.
Let's give an example of a bus station. Yeah, bus station. Yeah.
Okay.
Bus stop.
Yeah,
Bus stop.
Yeah.
So I'm going on a taxi. Okay.
Right.
And I have put a bus stop as a point of interest.
Right.
So if I'm going on a taxi, is gonna beep, or what kind of signal is gonna give me to say, oh my God, it seems the point of interest is located to your left, meaning the bus stop is right there.
Yep, I see what you mean. So that's where Lodestone's checkpoints come in. That's what we call checkpoints, and that is
also that's different.
Yeah. It's a little bit. It's so everything in the database is basically a point, or you could call it a point of interest. I guess that's a general term for any point in the database. But obviously, you don't since let's say in my area, there are thousands of points probably within the general area. So you wouldn't want to hear about every single one of them being announced. The phone would do nothing but talk, and you'd be getting overloads of information. So checkpoints are basically, you say, okay, I'm interested in this particular bus stop. So you could do a search for it, or if you, let's say, find it in your show neighborhood, or you could actually do a point search by name. And so you find the point, and then you check it. And that way, Lodestone, when you are approaching that point, it will say that you're approaching it. You'll get an alarm. And then when you arrive within about 15 meters of that point, you get the arrival alarm, and it tells you that you've actually arrived. And so you can have a lot of checkpoints saved, or if you want, or very few, depending on what you're doing.
Okay, I think I got a little bit lost with this. What would be the difference between a point of interest and a checkpoint?
Well, a point of interest is just the generic term for any point in the Lodestone databases. So that's basically any point that might be marked somewhere. That's all it is. They call that either a point or a point of interest. But a checkpoint.
So what you're trying to say is,
yeah,
I think I understand. What you're trying to say is you recommend us, the users, to maybe use checkpoints for Domino's Pizza in places we want other than points of interest.
Right. You don't want to have, you would not want to have Lodestone announcing every point that you may have downloaded into your map database for a region, because there might be thousands of them, literally. It would be talking continuously. And you're not interested in every one of them, obviously. So yeah, points are basically.
How do you do that?
How do you what?
How do you do that it will not announce every single point of interest?
Well, no. By default, Lodestone basically, if you don't check anything off, Lodestone won't tell you anything by default unless you ask it. So, for example, you could do a show neighborhood or a show closest point and find out where you are. But if you're just walking down the street with it, it's not continuously babbling away. Yeah.
So I was mistaken, Shawn. I thought I would create Domino's Pizza as a point of interest, and that's not good. I would create a checkpoint.
Well, it is a point of interest, and it might be a checkpoint. Like it would be both.
Checkpoint is more personal.
Yeah, you can figure it as it's more.
That's the thing. That's the thing. Checkpoint would be the right way to go for this one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the point of interest means that it is in the database somewhere, and you may or may not have any use for it at some point. But a checkpoint is something that you want to hear about as you approach or arrive at it.
Now, Shawn, do you share your checkpoints, or do you or just the points of interest?
You just share the points of interest because checkpoints might be pretty individual to a person, right? Like everyone have different points.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, before I let you go, because our listeners must be thinking, "Oh my God, how much information can I get?" But this is what I like about this subject because it was so powerful. It's been so useful for our listeners. So tell us your final thoughts. It doesn't matter if it's long, Shawn. Okay, don't get freaked out about it. But I just want you to describe other features of the app, whatever you have in mind, maybe new features that are coming along, whatever you think it may be useful for our listeners.
Okay, as we've demonstrated just part of what's on the navigation screen. As I said, there is the turn-by-turn navigation feature, which was a big request for a long time, and it's actually in. And you can save your own points of interest, of course. But there is also other features in Lodestone in the extras section. For example, there's a trip meter, so you can actually figure out how far you've traveled. You can measure your distance. And then there's the astronomic section, because for some reason there was a lot of blind people that wanted to know about things like sunrise and moonrise and all of that astronomic stuff. So there's a whole screen that will tell you everything you ever wanted to know about the current values of the sun and moon.
Wow.
I actually had a user that was telling me, one of my translators, saying that, since he can't see it all, he can use this feature to sort of track where the sun is in relation to him and get an idea of what the conditions are like.
The conditions? What do you mean?
Like the weather conditions, like where the sun is in relation to where he is. I didn't quite understand it myself, but he seemed to think it was quite important so that he could know what the sun was doing. So you can track it like that. And so there's a big screen like that. And the other thing in the extras section that's useful to the users is the help section. And in there is complete application documentation that you can read. You don't need an internet connection to read it. It's all contained within the app. And then there's also buttons that you can do to visit the Lodestone website and things. And then there is also the settings, which lets you configure anything and everything you could want in Lodestone. So you can configure, let's say, the types of points that you hear of, that you see in, let's say, your show neighborhood. So, for example, you might not want to know about every fire hydrant that may be in the neighborhood, so you can filter them out. That type of thing.
And different languages?
Yep, the app is available in different languages. So far we have German, Italian, Portuguese, am I missing? Yeah, Polish, Russian, and Turkish. And Estonian.
Do you have Arabic?
Yes, Arabic too. Yes, I might have missed one or two more. Yeah.
So we need the Latin American languages. We need Spanish and French.
Yeah. But we have volunteer translators that actually help with all of that.
The Spanish language translator is gonna come soon. That's what I'm gonna say.
I could try it, but I don't really have the interest.
Yeah. And the other thing is that Lodestone has a website. It's www.lodestone-gps.com, and you can read. Well, again, the user manual for the program is online. It's there. So before purchasing the app, let's say, if you want to know if it's for you, you can read the complete documentation. And there's also an FAQ And there's also a lot of tutorial videos that are done by me. Text descriptions of the videos, and you can actually play the videos on YouTube. So we've tried to make as much of a user experience as we can.
I think it's unbelievable the job you have done, I have to say. And Shawn, are you satisfied with the result, or you want even more features?
Shawn is never satisfied. He
yeah.
always wants faster and better and more.
Yeah, there's always more features I want to put in. There's a to-do list of things that I have that I would like to actually put in. You know, some I probably will get to at some point, and others might never happen, but would be nice. And it's usually a question of time and prioritizing. So if something really needs, you know, what with the iOS 13 coming out, the priority suddenly went to bug fixes, because what happened, unfortunately, was iOS 13 hit and Lodestone quit. It would not work for anybody. Everyone was getting no GPS signals, and they all thought that their latitude, longitude put them in the Atlantic Ocean.
Oh, wow.
It was not good. So immediate fix had to come out pretty much like the next day or two. But then, unfortunately, what happened was that fix broke other things that had previously been working in the operating. So right now, you might, like, some users are experiencing some crashes. So my next priority is to get a release out that fixes the things that were broken by the other fix. So it's a matter of bug chasing now.
Yeah, and I have to say this show is going to be released maybe, because this is being recorded right now.
Right.
But by the end of November, but probably it's going to be posted either by the end of December or the beginning of next year.
Okay.
So we don't know yet. I have someone helping me with that one.
So you just give me the link, and then we'll post a link to this on the Lodestone site too as well.
Count on that. And for our listeners, before I let Shawn go and Kristy, who have been more than nice to answer all my God, how many questions. I don't recall asking so many questions in a podcast, and I've done hundreds. So yeah. My comment about Apple is I love Apple, but it has to be said, iOS 13 could have been better for our listeners. I don't have it, but I know many people who have it, and they are struggling a lot. Thankfully, as we are recording, this podcast has improved, it has to be said, but it still has many things to be done and fixed for people like Shawn, who is doing a wonderful job, but he needs help from iOS 13 too.
Yeah. Basically, if you're for any listeners still on iOS 12, stay on that operating system unless you absolutely need to go to 13, and you probably don't.
Yes, sir. I will stay on.
So I'm having Kristy's phone sit on iOS 12 until all the bugs have been ironed out in 13.
That's a wonderful, wonderful way to put it. And Shawn, finally, how can people reach out for you?
Again, there is the website, www.lodestone-gps.com, and we are available on Facebook. Kristy can, what is
Facebook.com/Lodestone GPS, and on Twitter, of course, Lodestone_GPS, I think, or Lodestone GPS, just do a search.
Yeah.
And of course, we have a GoFundMe campaign because Shawn works for free. So beyond the app sales, but it takes a lot of manpower and man hours to do this, and
server operations and other things.
Yeah,
so we're always
like
looking.
Anything,
donate
funding
money
is appreciated. And I have to say, you run a really good podcast. This was impressive.
Oh, thank you.
And your English is very good from an English teacher point of view.
Oh, thank you, Kristy. I feel so good right now, huh? Because I'm so happy I did this interview for our listeners. I have been excited about this. I don't know why, because I have to say, I like always to be honest for Shawn, Kristy, and our listeners. I do not have the app just yet, but I was going to install it this Christmas.
Well, now you know what you're in for if you do the install.
Oh, I'm going to buy it for sure, because it's a wonderful app, I have to say. And I haven't used it, but I know it's a wonderful app. And I have read many good reviews for people that know about Applebee's.com, and I have interviewed those guys also.
Yeah.
And they have many good reviews about it as well. So it's a wonderful app. You got to get it. You have to go to the App Store and get it. It's very affordable, but it's a Swiss knife application for listeners. So, Shawn, Kristy, yeah, I know you love it, and you can count when I will post the show, I will add that paragraph to it when I promote it. You count on it. Shawn, Kristy, has been a privilege to have you on. Thank you so much for what you are doing.
Yeah.
And yes,
Gracias, Padre
Accuracy,
Chulo.
25 meters.
Yeah, I'm glad we got the interview started. There were some technical things. I didn't think this was going to happen at first there.
me neither. But
Skype was
that's
being
the way
temperamental.
technology works. So
Yeah.
you never know.
No.
Please have a wonderful night. Merry Christmas to everybody, to you both, and to our listeners. And it's so exciting to meet people like you both. Great people, I have to say, for our listeners. So we'll be in touch, my friends.
All right.
Keep the good work.
Thank you.
Adios.
Adios. And for our listeners, remember, you can follow me on Twitter at Low Vision Bureau. You can email me at lowvisionbureau@gmail.com. This is Alvaro from LVB Show saying, I'm very excited and saying good night, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, everybody. See you next year, 2020, which is going to be a wonderful year for everybody. Goodbye.